She said it with a smile, like it was nothing. We wish Amanda's kids were our only grandkids. My mother said it right there in her living room, right in front of my 9-year-old daughter. Junie's face fell like someone cut the strings. She clutched the handmade card she'd spent hours coloring, blinked twice, and then she ran. I heard her sobs disappear down the hallway, small feet slapping the floor, and the whole room just froze. Everyone stared at their plates. My father nodded like it was a harmless joke. My sister didn't correct her. And in that moment, something inside me went ice cold. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't beg them to love my child. I just watched the truth show its teeth, picked up my daughter, and walked out. 3 days later, the life they'd been building on my back started falling apart, and they had no idea it was already too late to undo what they'd said. My name is Knox Cade Mercer, and I've kept this story bottled up for a long time because it still hurts in a way I can't explain without sounding angry. But I'm telling it now because maybe you've lived through the quiet kind of cruelty too, the kind people call a joke until it breaks a kid's heart. Before I share everything, I'd love to know you're here with me and listening. Comment hi below, or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. And if stories like this matter to you, stories about boundaries, family, and finally choosing your child, please subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, but it tells me I'm not alone, and it helps this reach someone who needs to hear it. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. My name is Knox Cade Mercer. I'm 33 years old, a compliance attorney based in Raleigh, Durham, and a single dad to a 9-year-old girl named Juniper, Junie for short. On the outside, I had it all together that Saturday afternoon. I wore the usual smile, had a bottle of Merlot tucked in my passenger seat, and even practiced small talk on the drive from Raleigh to my parents' house in Cary. But inside, something knotted deep in my chest. That day was supposed to be a turning point. I had a secret, a good one. I'd gotten a job offer from one of the biggest firms in Charlotte. The pay game-changing, the hours manageable, the kind of role people wait their whole careers for. I planned to tell my parents over birthday cake and wine that they could finally retire, that they could stop counting on me, that their son, the one they never quite praised, had finally made it. My mother, Lorraine Mercer, had always been the queen of curated impressions. Her house was spotless, like it had been bleached, buffed, and buffed again for a Southern living spread. The long oak table was set like it belonged in a showroom, and all the family pictures lined the mantel. Except mine. Mine were always the smallest frames tucked to the corners. A photo from my high school graduation, faded and crooked. Meanwhile, my sister Brielle had a whole shrine. That's the way it always was, Brielle and I. She was the chosen one. I was the one who showed up with my daughter and a polite smile. Brielle and her husband Gavin brought their 3 kids, the Mercer grandchild dream team. Miles, the poet with his quiet, calculated words. Aria, the pianist who didn't know a life without applause. And little Noah, the boy who could sing on pitch since preschool. To my parents, they weren't just children, they were legacy. They were proof of genetic triumph. Look at that talent, they'd say, beaming. It runs in the blood. But they never meant mine. Junie sat on the edge of the couch holding a red crayon card she'd spent the morning making. A wobbly heart, a few stick figures, and happy birthday grandma in chunky, uneven letters. I'd seen her work on it for hours. I'd told her it was beautiful. And I meant it. She'd asked me in the car, "Do you think Grandma will like it?" I told her, "You don't have to be the best. You just have to be real." I should have known how dangerous honesty is in a family that runs on performance. After the cake was sliced and the adults had moved on to reminiscing and red wine, my mother clapped her hands like an MC on cue. Why don't the kids do something special for Grandma? She always loved orchestrating these little performances every holiday, a talent show, every child a contestant. Of course, Brielle's kids went first. Miles stood and read a poem about family, the kind of perfectly rehearsed piece that sounded like it had been filtered through 5 edits and a thesaurus. Then Aria sat at the baby grand in the corner and performed a Chopin piece with clinical precision. Noah sang a short rendition of a Broadway tune, drawing exaggerated coos from my mother, who looked like she might cry from pride. The applause was thunderous, uncomfortably so. They clapped like a casting agent was watching. Then it was Junie's turn. She stood slowly, her small hands shaking as she clutched her birthday card. "I am gonna sing happy birthday," she whispered. I gave her a small nod, hoping my eyes could carry her through it. She started soft. Too soft. Her voice cracked a note early, then slipped again. By the second line, her throat tightened and her face flushed red. She choked on the words and fell silent. There was a long pause, an awkward, strained smattering of claps. Arya and Miles exchanged looks of quiet victory. Junie sat down, lower lip trembling, still holding the card she never got to give. And that's when Miles piped up again, bright-eyed and chipper. "Can I do another poem, Grandma?" My mother beamed. "Of course, sweetie." He performed again, flawlessly, predictably. And the applause rose again, louder than before. In the middle of that noise, my mother chuckled and said it, with a laugh, with her hand on her heart, with Junie sitting 5 feet away. "We wish Brielle's kids were our only grandkids." The room went still. My father Dennis nodded like she'd just toasted the queen. Brielle offered a stiff smile. Not one person pushed back. Not one adult said, "Hey, that's not okay." I turned to Junie just as her face broke. She stood the card clutched to her chest like a shield and sprinted down the hallway. The sound of her footsteps thudded like a heartbeat I couldn't protect. I stood up. My legs felt numb. My mother said quickly, "Oh, Knox, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke. Just a joke, like always." I didn't reply. I didn't trust my voice. I just walked down the hallway and found my daughter curled up by the laundry door, crying into her knees. The crayon card had been crushed in her fist. "Come on," I said, gently pulling her in. "We're going home." We passed through the silent dining room. The cake sat half-eaten, the room drained of warmth. No one stopped us. No one said sorry. They just watched us leave. In the car, Junie curled up in the passenger seat, face turned toward the window. I didn't try to tell her they didn't mean it, because they did. Instead, I whispered, "You didn't do anything wrong. Grown-ups say cruel things to make themselves feel better, but it doesn't make them right. You're amazing, Junie." She didn't reply. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But something inside me shifted. They had no idea what I'd been planning to tell them that night, about the new job, about the future I was ready to hand them. And now they never would. Because that joke, it didn't just kill the party, it changed everything. When we got back to our small house on the edge of Raleigh-Durham, Junie didn't say a word. She walked straight to her room, shut the door without a sound, and didn't even turn on the light. I gave her space. That's what she needed. Not fixing, not a performance. Just space to exist without being judged. Later that night, I found her curled up on her bed, sketchbook in hand. She wasn't drawing, just holding it, like a life jacket in a storm. She looked at me and asked, "Does Grandma hate me 9 years old?" And already she understood that some silences cut deeper than words. I sat on the edge of her bed. "No," I said carefully. But what she said was cruel. Even if she laughed, even if she said it was a joke, it was wrong. She nodded slowly, but I could see she didn't believe me. Not fully. Because when love comes with conditions, children start thinking the problem is them. But this wasn't about Junie. Not really. It was about something that had started long before she was born. It was about me. I was born to Lorraine and Dennis Mercer when they were barely out of high school. I wasn't planned. I wasn't wanted. They told people they were thrilled. But behind closed doors, the narrative was different. "You cost us our college dreams," my dad used to say with a laugh. My mom would chime in, "We could have been anything if not for you." Always with a smirk. Always like it was funny. I learned early that in our house, pain wore a smile. When Brielle came along 5 years later, everything changed. They were married by then, stable, ready. She was the golden one, the one with baby photos framed on every wall, the one who got ballet lessons, voice coaching applause. I got hand-me-downs and guilt trips. So I made a choice. I couldn't be wanted, but I'd make myself necessary. I studied harder than anyone else in that town. I became the first Mercer to go to college, then to law school. Full scholarship. I thought maybe now they'll be proud. They weren't. They were relieved. One less mouth to feed. And when they started Mercer Courier and Delivery, a little business with 3 vans and too many legal blind spots, guess who handled every permit, every audit, every compliance form for free me? I kept them afloat for 9 years. I fought off fines, responded to complaints, and cleaned up every disaster they couldn't see coming. I was their private attorney, their crisis hotline, their money tree. I even sent $300 a month to help with the mortgage. Quietly. Consistently. They never said thank you. They just asked when the next check would hit. And the truth hit me like a slap. They didn't love me because I was family. They kept me around because I was useful. That night I sat by Junie's bed and realized the same pattern was repeating. Only this time they weren't just hurting me, they were hurting her. Because she wasn't part of their perfect little dynasty. She was a reminder that I had chosen a different path. One that didn't serve their vision of success. Junie had been born from a relationship that didn't last. Her mother left early on and I never held it against her. Life happens. But when I told my parents I was keeping the baby, they begged me not to. "You're throwing your career away," my mother hissed. "You'll ruin everything again." But Junie wasn't a ruin. She was the reason I survived the emptiest years of my life. I took a less prestigious job so I could be home with her, less money, more time. And I'd do it again. But to my parents, that wasn't a sacrifice. That was failure. That night when Junie finally fell asleep, still clutching her sketchbook like a shield, I opened my laptop. My hands hovered over the keys. Then I canceled the recurring $300 transfer. Just like that. Next, I drafted an email. Effective immediately, I will no longer provide legal services to Mercer Courier and Delivery. Please consult an outside attorney for any future needs. I signed it with my full name. Knox Cade Mercer. Not your son. Just a professional ending a contract. Because that's what it had always been. A contract I never signed. And as I shut the laptop, I thought, I'm not breaking ties out of anger. I'm ending a pattern. I'm choosing my daughter over their comfort. And the kicker, I knew something they didn't. 3 days from now, one of their annual DOT filings was due. A big one. The kind of compliance deadline that, if missed, could trigger audits, fines, even license suspension. I had always handled it. This year, I wouldn't lift a finger. Let's see what happens when the help walks away. At 11:47 p.m., long after Junie had fallen asleep with her sketchbook still clutched to her chest, I opened my banking app and canceled the monthly $300 transfer I'd been sending to my parents for the last 7 years. It took 10 seconds, a click, a confirmation. And just like that, a contract they never acknowledged was quietly severed. Next, I opened my email. I didn't wordsmith it. No metaphors, no rage. Just a clean break. Effective immediately, I will no longer be handling any legal or compliance matters for Mercer Courier and Delivery. Please seek external counsel for your needs. Knox. Then I silenced the group family chat, disabled message previews, and placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter. I didn't owe them an explanation. But you know what I did owe them? A future. What they didn't know, what they'd never know now, was that the real reason I went to their house that Saturday was to give them something most people only dream of: a retirement plan. I'd received a new offer just a week earlier, partner track at a regional law firm in Charlotte. Solid money, reasonable hours. And I had a plan. I had already drafted a financial map. I'd pay off their mortgage, set up a basic retirement account, loop them into my firm's family healthcare plan. They wouldn't need to worry about van insurance DOT filings or last-minute compliance scrambling anymore. But they threw all of that away with one sentence. Not just the future, but the respect they never knew they'd been offered. The next morning, I woke up to a polite, performative text from my father. "When you've calmed down, let's talk. No need to let emotions ruin decades of love." An hour later, reminder: DOT filing due this week. Takes 5 minutes max. Help your old man out. I ignored both. My energy wasn't going to them anymore. It was going to Junie. I got her ready for school like any other Monday. She stayed quiet, nodded when I asked about lunch, hugged me longer than usual before stepping out of the car. I watched her walk inside her pink backpack, bouncing lightly, and reminded myself that protecting her didn't end at home. It extended into every space where she might be hurt again. That afternoon, I called the school and scheduled her into the after-school art club. She needed safe places, places without judges. Her art teacher, Ms. Albright, picked up the phone personally. "I've noticed she's quieter than usual," she said gently. "She has a lot inside that one. We'll take good care of her." I hung up with a quiet sense of resolve. Then I made another decision, one I never imagined making. I set a boundary. No visits, no calls, no access to Junie until they issued a real apology, one that acknowledged what they'd said and what it had done to her. They wouldn't use her to guilt me, to loop me back into their mess. Not this time. By late afternoon, the shift in tone had begun. Brielle texted me a string of messages that started as sugar and curdled fast. "You're taking this too far," she wrote. "It was just a bad joke." "You know, Mom," I replied once Junie cried herself to sleep. "That's not a joke." She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, it was worse. "She's a sensitive kid, Z. You can't expect everyone to walk on eggshells." And there it was. Brielle wasn't neutral. She had always played the part, silent when convenient, smiling when the spotlight was hers. And her silence that day in the living room, that was complicity. Still, she'd done me a favor. With every word, she reminded me why this line needed to be drawn. And I knew something else too, something they hadn't realized yet. The company was standing on a ledge. There was a critical compliance document, an annual renewal with the Department of Transportation that I'd always handled. If it wasn't filed within 3 business days of its due date, it would trigger a cascade of consequences. Fines, red flags, audits, and worse, scrutiny into every gray area fix I'd patched over the last few years to keep their business from imploding. I used to protect them from themselves, not anymore. That night, around 8:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my father. I didn't pick up, but I listened. Zeph, his voice was tight, anxious. "Some guy from the state called about the fleet paperwork. Says we're behind. They asked for documentation I've never heard of. Call me, please." I locked my phone. I hadn't pushed them off a cliff. I had simply stepped away from being their guardrail. But just as I was letting that settle, a new notification came in. Not from them. From someone I hadn't heard from in months, Mark Benner, a former compliance officer I'd worked with during a federal audit years ago. "Hey, Zeph, heads up. Word is DOT's pushing your parents' company up on the list. Audit might be coming sooner than scheduled. Thought you should know." I sat back in my chair, exhaled slowly. 3 days. That's how long it took for the first piece to fall. The morning of day 3 started like any other. I took Junie to her first trial day at the local arts academy, just a short session to get her comfortable with the space and meet the instructors. She was nervous, but curious, clutching her sketchbook like a passport to a world she might finally belong in. My phone buzzed before I even pulled out of the parking lot. 6 missed calls from Dennis, 3 messages from Lorraine, 2 from Brielle. Then came the voicemail. "One of the vans got pulled over this morning," Dennis said. Voice strained. "They asked for DOT logs, but the driver didn't have the right paperwork. Said something about non-compliance and opening a case. We need that renewal form now. Just send the damn thing." I didn't respond, because that renewal form was in my hands. Or more accurately, had always been in my hands. They had no idea where it lived, how to file it, what it even looked like. The driver had likely been operating on expired permits. That alone could mean fines of thousands. But worse, it signaled something more dangerous to regulators, a pattern of negligence. And once regulators smell that, they dig. That's when the real panic started. Lorraine messaged me at noon. "Please, just help us this once. I'm begging you. Don't ruin everything." She still hadn't mentioned Junie. Brielle called 5 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. "You're being vindictive," she snapped. "You're gonna kill Mom and Dad with this stress. Do you want them to lose the house? Because that's what'll happen. Is that what you want? It was always the same equation. My guilt as currency, their negligence as entitlement. I texted back a single sentence, hire a lawyer. Then silence. For an hour. Until Lorraine tried again, this time a different approach. Can I speak to Junie? Her message read. I think hearing my voice might cheer her up. She loves Grandma. I almost laughed. They didn't want to make it right. They wanted to find a side door into my resolve. Use the child they hurt as a leash. I replied no contact until there's a real apology for what was said and for what it did to her. No answer. And then the shift I'd been waiting for. My dad left another voicemail, this one shorter. I don't know what the hell your problem is. You're a lawyer. You could have signed that form in your sleep. 5 minutes. That's all we needed. But no. You have to make a show of it. That was it. That was the line. In 5 minutes I used to save their asses, and now those 5 minutes were proof they never saw it as help, just as duty. I watched Junie through the academy's windows. She was sitting at a table with other kids, head down, pencil, moving slowly. Her teacher, Ms. Albright, leaned in, gently said something I couldn't hear. Junie nodded but didn't smile. Later, Ms. Albright told me Junie had drawn a picture titled Invisible in a room full of people. A child sitting at the center of a birthday party surrounded by faces turned away. I swallowed hard. I couldn't undo what they did, but I could make sure it didn't happen again. That afternoon, I received a formal notice from the Department of Transportation. A site audit had been scheduled for Mercer Courier and Delivery within the next 4 business days. That was the nail. I knew exactly what the audit would find: incomplete records, expired filings, missing inspections. Things I had covered before, bandaged with temporary solutions because they always said they'd fix it next time. Now there was no next time. Dennis called again. This time I picked up. What the hell is going on? He barked. You really want to see us drag through this? I don't want anything, I said calmly. I'm not your lawyer anymore. You're our son. Not your property, I corrected. Not your cleanup crew. You're betraying your family. No, I said. I'm protecting mine. Then I hung up. I knew they weren't done. They'd dig deeper, push harder. Maybe even try to play dirtier. But they had no idea how much I'd already let go. And I wasn't turning back. By the time Tuesday rolled into Wednesday, the calls from my father thinned out. Not because they respected the silence, but because they found a louder weapon. Family gossip in the South is a wildfire with no season, no mercy, no need for proof. It only needs a spark and a story that feels satisfying to pass along. And my parents knew exactly how to light it. I started getting texts from cousins, uncles, people I barely spoke to. We heard you cut them off. You too good for Carrie now. Since when does a Mercer walk away from blood? It was almost impressive how fast they rewrote the narrative. In their version, I was a villain who'd tasted a job offer and forgotten the dirt under his boots. My mother told Aunt Cheryl that Charlotte had turned me snobby. My father told Uncle Ray that I'd abandoned the family business for prestige. Brielle told her friend network that I was spiraling because someone got into my head. They used phrases like betrayal, ego, arrogance. They never mentioned the only phrase that actually mattered. We wish Brielle's kids were our only grandkids, spoken to a child who believed every word adults said. The subtext was obvious. Shame me into returning. Shame is the cheapest leash they sell, and it works on most people. It used to work on me too. But shame doesn't work when the cost of returning is your child's self-worth. On Thursday, Aunt Cheryl showed up uninvited at my doorstep. She didn't ring the bell. She knocked. A deliberate old-school knock, the kind that says this isn't casual. I opened the door, already braced. Your mama says you've changed since that big offer, she said softly. Says you think you're above us now. I almost smiled. Not from humor, from recognition. The same script, new venue. They left out the part I said evenly where Mom said Junie wasn't really family. Said she wished only Brielle's kids were her grandchildren. Her eyebrows pulled together. They said that, yes, right in front of her. She ran. She cried. I didn't. The room didn't explode, but the air rearranged. It always does when truth drops in without embellishment. Cheryl exhaled sharp like someone punched a hole through her nostalgia. She didn't need more. She just needed the real sentence. And like all sentences that matter, it carried its own momentum. Within hours, the gossip chain started reversing direction. Calls shifted from accusation to disbelief to outrage. My cousin Lena texted, "I'm sorry, I assumed." Poor Junie. Uncle Ray called and said, "Your father's full of it, huh?" The shame they tried to sell me came back with interest. I met Junie's art teacher, Ms. Albright, at a cafe near the academy after class. She brought Junie's latest drawing with her. The paper was creased at the corner. The mountain in the drawing was drawn taller than the sky, and a small girl stood at the top holding a paintbrush like a flag. Albright didn't pry into the family chaos. She didn't need to. She was concerned about the kid, not the adults who broke her. "She doesn't have to perform to belong here," Ms. Albright said. "She just has to keep creating." I nodded. That's all I ever wanted for her. I updated Junie's school permissions, no pickups by grandparents, no contact, no loopholes. She deserved safety, not spectators. That was my version of action. Financially, the shock was slower, but sharper. A month earlier, I'd been on track for partner talks. But when I quietly asked Maya Tran, my colleague, an occasional audit confidant, to grab coffee after work, she said she'd run into my parents at the Harris Teeter grocery store. Maya thought they knew. She thought everyone knew. "I congratulated them," she said carefully. "Told them you were planning to let them retire once your Charlotte position started." They looked like someone pulled the floor out from under them. I blinked. "Interesting," I said. Maya added, "I didn't know they didn't know." They didn't. They also didn't know they were standing on me. She went quiet. The cinematic irony was unmissable. The same floor that had propped them up was me, and I'd just walked away from the job. By Friday evening, the texts had changed flavor. Softer, sticky, an attempt at sweetness. "We miss you," Lorraine wrote. "Let's talk. Families make mistakes. Just meet us halfway," Dennis wrote. "Business hearing next week. We just need you there for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Always 5 minutes." They thought it was a joke. They thought I'd regret it. They thought my silence was temporary. But silence isn't temporary when it becomes a strategy for self-preservation. The last message came from Brielle late Friday night. "What will it take for you to stop this?" I stared at the text thread. The irony didn't make me laugh this time. It made me tired. Tired in the way that feels final. My reply was short. A real apology to Junie without conditions. No scripts, no substitutions, no caveats. Delivered like a verdict. And verdicts are supposed to close doors, not open them. Saturday morning. The 6th day since the party. Lorraine wanted a neutral meeting spot. Neutral sounds fair. Neutral sounds like progress. Neutral sounds like adult conversation. So she chose a small diner called Briggs Kitchen and Bar in downtown Cary. The kind of place with mismatched chairs, honest food, local beer taps, and no chandeliers for dramatic effect. I agreed to meet them, but I set terms. Terms are how I speak when feelings aren't the currency anymore. "We start with an apology to Junie," I said in the text. "We finish without involving her." They accepted, or at least they typed acceptance. And typing acceptance is easy. Living it is harder. When I walked into the diner, it was already wrong. The table was bigger than needed. Brielle was there. Gavin was there. Aunt Cheryl, too. Uncle Ray, arms crossed like a man summoned to pass judgment. If nostalgia were a courtroom, this was opening statements. My mother was holding a folder of forms before she was holding her coffee. Dennis didn't wait for menus. He waited for leverage. "Let's get the business part out of the way," he said quickly. "Then we can heal." Heal. A verb weaponized like a prepayment plan. They wanted the hearing handled first. They wanted Junie soothed later. They wanted their son to be their lawyer again. And the lawyer in me knew this wasn't healing. This was choreography. A diner stage instead of a living room stage, but a stage nonetheless. Lorraine cleared her throat. I'm sorry if Junie misunderstood. If. There it was again. The cheapest clause in their apology contract. No, I said. No if. No misunderstood. Say the sentence. Say you were wrong. Say it was cruel. Her eyes flicked toward Brielle like she wanted a side door. Side doors used to work on me. They used to make me return to the table. But side doors are useless when the problem is the foundation, not the furniture. Just help us through the audit hearing next week, Dennis said, leaning in. You can cut us off after. No, I said. That's not how hearings work. And that's not how debt works either. I reminded him quietly that a compliance hearing doesn't forgive negligence just because someone charming shows up. It forgives preparation. And I was no longer their preparation. He slammed his hand softly, angrily against the vinyl seat. We raised you. We gave you everything. I leaned back. You gave me a narrative. I survived it. And then I paid you back $300 a month for 7 years. That payment stops now. His face twitched. He didn't know the numbers. He only knew the habit of receiving them. Let me talk to Junie Lorraine, try it again. I'll make it right with her. You won't, I said. Because you still think this is about access. This is about accountability. And accountability starts with naming the cruelty, not avoiding it. The folder Dennis slid toward me was filled with forms they wanted me to sign. Signature used to be a formality. In law, it's representation. In business, it's liability. In family, it had been ownership. Ownership by default. Ownership without consent. Ownership by habit. And I wasn't signing ownership anymore. Junie wasn't there to watch the adults fail their own performance review. But she was in the building of my motivations. She was the silent plaintiff in a diner case that never should have reached her. And the attorney in me knew that the most important filings are never on paper. They're the boundaries you file in your own life. So I stood up, slowly. No scenes, no speeches, no tears. Just a man walking out of a diner that thought it was a courtroom. Zeph, Uncle Ray said, voice softer, lower, like a man who suddenly realized there were consequences. You sure? Yes, I said. I'm protecting my daughter. You can't negotiate love with forms. And you can't negotiate compliance with charm. I walked out. The bell above the diner door jingled lightly. Cinematic enough, confessional enough, final enough. By Sunday evening, the compliance clock struck exactly as I knew it would. The audit hearing was scheduled, the fleet paperwork was overdue, and the cracks I'd patched for 9 years were finally visible without me standing in front of them like scaffolding removed from a building that never deserved it. And now, for the first time, the audience watching this wasn't the Mercers. It was everyone else. And everyone else could finally see the architecture of what had been built on my silence. Saturday morning, I was zipping Junie's art tote shut, about to drive her to her weekend class at the art academy. She was humming faintly, almost back to herself. Then the doorbell rang twice sharp. I checked the camera. Lorraine and Dennis stood on the porch, dressed like Easter Sunday, holding a huge cake and a pink bag with sparkles. A performance was coming. I asked Junie to stay in her room and turn on some music. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. On the cake, to our favorite granddaughter Junie. Decorative icing, loud and clumsy. Not a single card. Not a real apology. Lorraine's voice carried across the yard. We just want to see Junie. Dennis shifted to show the cake to the street. This wasn't for Junie. It was for the neighbors, for the audience. We need to talk, Dennis said. Audits this week. Lorraine chimed in. Just help us get through this. Then I'll talk to Junie. I didn't raise my voice. No. The apology comes first. To her. No conditions, no ifs. Lorraine blinked, her eyes wet, but not with remorse. Dennis clenched his jaw. You're letting your own family drown, I answered. You did that when you told my daughter she didn't belong. They tried to leave the cake. I refused. I told them I'd call the HOA if they didn't take it. They finally left, walking slow like I was the villain in the story. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A former compliance officer at DOT I used to work with left a message the audit was confirmed, and without legal representation or proper filings, penalties could rise fast. If I stepped in now, I'd risk professional liability again for a company that never valued me. By Tuesday, Mercer Courier was hit with the first fine. Brielle messaged me, "You ruined everything. You destroyed our family." I didn't respond with anger, just clarity. No, I stopped letting you destroy mine. The fall came slowly then all at once. Mercer Courier missed every audit checkpoint. They got slapped with penalty after penalty. No legal rep, no defense. Eventually, a labor complaint from months ago resurfaced, and that cracked the door wide open. By winter, they had to sell the house in Cary. Brielle shouldered some debt. Turns out she'd signed a personal guarantee on a van lease. Lorraine and Dennis moved into a rented 2-bedroom near Apex. Nobody from the family said it out loud, but I knew the ground they'd built their power on had crumbled. I didn't celebrate. I told the truth to the right people at the right time. Aunt Cheryl asked, so I answered plainly what Lorraine said, how Junie cried, how they never apologized. Word spread. No gossip, just gravity. One afternoon, Lorraine called. "Can we just talk?" I agreed to one condition. Say it to Junie. No deflection, no pretending it was a joke. She hesitated. I didn't mean to hurt her. That's not what I asked. She never said the words. I made my line clear: no contact unless she could admit the truth to the one person they hurt most. Until then, we were done. Meanwhile, Junie thrived. She started smiling more at school, made a close friend in art club. One of her drawings, a quiet piece of a small girl under a spotlight that didn't quite reach her, got featured at a kids' gallery downtown. She stood beside it and talked to strangers about color and space like she owned the room. She never needed their love to shine, just safety. As for me, I took the Charlotte job. I worked remote part of the week with enough freedom to drop Junie off cooked dinner live like a whole person. One afternoon at a school event, I met Elliot Hayes, whose daughter Harper was in Junie's class. It started with 2 tired parents making small talk by the water table. Weeks later, it turned into dinner. A few months after that, into something real. Not perfect, but solid. Chosen.